Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonksen, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast today. I'm so excited that you're joining us. This is part of Church Boom. If you ever need anything, resources, coaching, anything, you can always go to churchboom.org. Today we're talking with my good friend Paul from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He's got an amazing church out there, and we're talking about the 5 components that you evaluate in a Sunday service. What do we evaluate to continue that we're moving forward, and how does that evaluation take place? It is a great conversation. Hope you enjoy it. How can I help you today, man? What's on your mind?
Well, I framed some questions, that I thought would be apropos for maybe where we are, and also kind of thinking of through the lens of maybe where others are that have been through our journey too, right? So one of the things I thought about as we're growing our staff, and this could apply to shuffling a little bit, but what are the top 3 seats that you feel like a staff needs when building, the top 3 or first 3 hires maybe when building a staff?
Oh man. Well, I think part of that can be aligned to the 5 things that I think that you should always look for. So when I'm evaluating a church, or we have several campuses in our world, we evaluate it. We always evaluate by the same 5 things. We evaluate the message, the worship, children's, next steps, and environment. So those 5 things we're always evaluating. So if you take those 5 things and move them over, how does that translate? Well, you got a lead pastor, you got worship, you got children's, and you got next steps. Those are the things for me, especially in the early days. Now, it depends. As you grow, that changes, of course. But in the early days, if a church is telling me, hey, man, we're launching a new campus, for instance, we're launching a new campus in whatever city. Okay, what do we need to have? I just literally just helped the church launch the next campus. I'm like, look, you're not launching with the next campus pastor. You're launching with the next campus staff. And what you need is you got to have the leader, you got to have worship, you got to have children, and you got to have all things next step. And I think that 4th one is the one that people miss the most. They don't think about that. Yeah, they're like, I got worship, we got children. I'm like, who's overseeing all the next steps? Because that's how we're going to grow this thing. Speed of engagement, not attendance. Yeah. So those things I think we look at down the road. And I advise people, I wouldn't look at it down the road. I would look at it day one. Who's making sure?
When you say environments, you're talking about the facilities and the look and feel, aesthetic.
Yeah, just cleanliness, facility, all that. So if I'm evaluating, those are the things we're evaluating. So I don't think that equates into a staff member, but the other 4 equate into a staff member.
So tell me about the message. What is the fail? What's good or bad in the message? What's a sure fail? What's a sure win? What are the things that are like,
Yeah. Well,
hamstringing people?
Yeah. I can tell you how it feels. I can tell you how I would evaluate it. So in our context, in our multi-site world context of South Hills Church, the things that I've always evaluated over the years and that I want to see. Some are real simple, like, hey, we always make a call for salvation. Okay, that's pretty simple. But I want it to, in the time frame, I want it to be in about the 30 to 37, 38 minute range in a time frame. I want it to be, and here's why. Some people might think, man, that's really short. Most people are not masterful communicators. And if you're not if you're like God's gift to communication, then you're God's gift to communication. But the average person isn't God's gift to communication. So one thing I always say is, would you rather have 16 ounces of chuck steak or 6 ounces of filet? Mm-hmm. I'd rather have 6 ounces of filet. Personally, I think most people would choose 6 ounces of filet over 16 ounces of chuck steak. And it's the same thing with the message, where I'm like, okay, give me 32, 35, 37, but make it really good, is what I look at. The other thing that I personally look at, I can't speak for other people, I look at that. So salvation, there's a salvation opportunity. There is the time frame. I look at whether or not it is bilingual. What I mean by bilingual is not English and Spanish, but church and unchurched.
Wow, that's great.
Is it church and unchurched? Okay, I want the church going, man, that was good. I want the unchurched going, that makes sense. And one of our greatest compliments is when someone from our denomination, one of the top guys of our denomination, happened to be in town and go to one of our campuses. And during the greeting time, I didn't know this. I didn't find this out until Monday. And during the greeting time, he met someone sat right next to him. Guy's 40 years old, him and his wife, first time to church. They really don't have a church history. After church, he in his mind was thinking, man, the denomination leader was thinking, man, that was gold. Man, that was amazing. That was insightful. That was so good. And he asked what the other guy thought, and the guy said the same thing. That was so insightful. And the ability to take someone who probably got 18 degrees in theology and feel like, wow, that was awesome, and the construction worker, it was his first time to church, and they both walk away going, that was amazing. That's an objective we go after.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's pretty awesome. But yeah, the message, I mean, I don't think I speak outside of 30 minutes, but are you talking about the 37-minute type, 38 minutes, like being also with the close and the appeal and everything, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, all said and done, yep. So, and typically it's going to be a little less than that. It's probably going to be more in the 32 range, 30 to 35 range. But, you know, there's an appeal, there's, you know, extra little fluff. I get that, but that's kind of what we're looking for. That's what we look for, at least. The bilingual thing, though, is really important, I think, as well, personally.
Worship, you know, is such a ticklish thing, you know, and hard to find the right kind of people, and every city's different, and you know, finding somebody for worship, that's got to be one of the hardest picks out there.
Oh, it is, isn't it? Well, and it's because it's such a culture creator. You know, it sets the culture, and there's not, you know, when you got a great worship leader, man, they just set you up. You know, they teed it up. They threw you a nice, soft, slow pitch. When the worship is a debacle, man, you're starting in the basement.
Yeah. I mean, we've had it all, right?
I've started in the basement.
Absolutely stop a song. Used to drive me crazy. You know, there's no transition between songs. I hate that feeling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but some things are more mechanical, and so many things are so feely touchy. And I mean, the message and worship are so nuanced that way.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah.
So one of the other things I was thinking about, if you have 5 staffers at the table and a few key volunteers, you know, leaders, how do you suggest involving them in the engagement goals that we talk about, engaging a staff? I know we talked a little bit about this in November, but how about developing them so that they think through the lens of engagement and holding them accountable to it?
Are you saying, so I'm hearing you right, you're saying to help the 5 staff members start to think through engagement?
The lens of engagement, like my job, my main job is to engage.
Yeah, that is. It's ironic that you bring that up. It feels like myself and those that do some of the executive coaching in the church boom side of my life, that seems to be quite a conversation that we're having. That it seems like it takes staff members quite a while, for whatever reason, to have the paradigm shift in their mind to realize, look, we didn't hire you to do all these 19 things every week. We hired you to develop leaders and build teams to do the 19 things, or a lot of those things. And it's really hard to transition over because, you know, if you own a construction company and you hire Tom to, you know, I don't know, whatever, hang drywall, you walk in and go, all right, here's the living room of the house, and make sure the drywall's up by the, you know, whatever time. He's got a very clear list of what he's to do. And he's not going to go out and find a guy on the street to do it for him. He's going to do it. And you're expecting him to do it. In this context, it's vastly different because we're just saying, no, actually, we want you to develop leaders and build teams. So I do think that there is, Paul, I think there's a paradigm shift that takes place that is really difficult for some people to get for whatever reason. It's just difficult for them to get. I think that the way that one of the ways that you can kind of help push this along is to do two things. One is when you're doing those 90-day runs and getting people engaged in a 90-day process, it needs to be a regular part of the staff meeting. What number are we at? Where are we at? Who did you get? All that. And then it needs to be part of the one-on-one. So if I'm meeting with Steve, one of the associates, pastor, or whatever, and I'm meeting with him, and I'm your executive pastor, or I'm you, or whoever, and I got to hold Steve accountable. I'm going to meet with him every other week. How's your ministry going? What's going on? And how are we doing with recruiting? Well, I haven't been able to. Okay, this is the third time you said you haven't been able to. What's the problem? I think there has to be positive pressure that's applied until it becomes part of the norm, because it's currently not part of the norm.
Okay, so in our workflows, for instance, of those 93 cards that we've got in adult, so we get assigned. Like I've asked to be assigned. They didn't. That wasn't originally part of it, but I love it. So don't leave me out. But so there's that initial engagement and trying to get them the next steps, right? So who owns the process from the card all the way? Like there's varied people. You don't know what they're about. You don't know what their backgrounds are. So you have a card, but
Right.
how do you turn that into your ownership of an engagement? Or have I got the wrong idea here about?
Well, I don't know if I would. No, I think it's fine. But taking that card and moving that over, that may be one thing. If that's what you guys are doing, that may be a way of doing that. I think also where I feel it's a little bit more organic and it comes more natural is when a staff member, I always say, as a staff member, walk away with 2 phone numbers every Sunday. So find newer people. That's got to be part of your checklist. So a worship guy says, I get there at 7:30. I turn on the lights. I turn on the heat. I turn on the sound. I, put all the charts out. Like he's got this little to-do list going on in his head or her head or whatever. But if one of those is, you got to figure out how to engage with 2 people here. And it doesn't mean that you're going to recruit them to your team. We just want them to get recruited. I don't care if they join the worship team. I don't care if they join the greeting team. I just want them to join something. I feel like organically it is much better relationship to relationship. Everything moves at the speed of relationship. So
Yeah, I like that feeling because that feels more like DNA than just a workflow process. And if you build that into the DNA, then you have both system, a system working and you have the people working. That's awesome.
Yeah. And they should, like the average person, I think kind of a 1.5 to 2 per month when they're working the lobby and all that. If they can average, if each person can average 1.5 to 2 people per month, so over a 6 month period, that would be, 10 to 12. I mean, you got 5 staff members. 5 times 2 is 10. 10 times 3 is 30. In 90 days, that's 30 new people engaged from an organic relationship, and it'll probably last quite a bit longer because it was done.
Right.
I always say everything moves at the speed of relationships.
Yeah, so like for us, we had 40 people hit next steps, but that didn't, and some of those would have peeled off into a small group. Some would have maybe gotten on a serve team, but I'm not going to say that all 40 of those are truly engaged. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They've started down the process.
Right.
So it's a little, there's still a lot to worry about there.
Yeah,
we have
there
a
is.
people board. We have a people board that shows where people are.
Right.
And we did that analog. We took it out of the digital environment so that we could actually see.
Right. Yep. So I think trying that organic feel and that relationship feel, but they need to view it as part of what they do.
Yeah.
It's not a separate duty. It's what we do. And if they're not walking away with 2 numbers per Sunday, they're not going to hit their, at least 1 per Sunday, but more like 2. They're not going to hit their goals.
I see.
And they can. And they're just finding new people like, hey, I've noticed you've been coming around here for a few months. What's your name? Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Man, you feed them a little compliment. Hey, you got a big smile on your face, and man, I think there's a really cool way that God could use that amazing smile of yours for something really cool here at the church. Could I call you this week?
Yeah.
People just say yes. They're not going to say no.
Oh, I know it. Yeah. And I mean, in the engagement piece, totally, I get it. I mean, there was this new kid that came a few weeks ago and I just said, hey, they're needing a little help on the tear down after Easter, would you be interested in helping with that? I just did a conversation, then I passed him
Right.
along to somebody, and dude, he showed up so early. He was so eager to do that and to be involved. It
That's
just
so
gives,
awesome.
yeah, it gives life to people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
So
That's great.
one of the other things I was wondering about, and maybe you can coach me up on a little bit here, is we talked about mission critical for staff, and then mission critical for pastors, right? So as a church moves from 400 to 1,000, what do you start seeing as mission critical? What should pastors not be doing, and what are things that they got to be doing?
Yeah. As pastors continue to move up the scales of growth, their mission critical, as you said, begins to change. I do think that you have to stay inside of mission critical, and I think you should never have more than 3 or 4 things that are mission critical. Now, there's a lot of activities that live in that mission critical. You say, "Hey, I'm the chief communicator." Yeah, well, okay, you got a sermon prep, you got to do social media, or it doesn't mean you got to do it, but it's got to happen. Your voice has got to get out there. So, what are the 5 things you have to do to make that happen? I think as you continue to grow, I think fostering the finances is a big part of it, because without the finances, everything is won and lost in the resources. And so, how does that fostering happen? How does the main guy start to think like, okay, if we go from 400 to 1,000, that's a lot more money. If we see a lot of people come to Christ, how's the money going to catch up? Because people get saved, then their wallet gets saved about 18 months later. So how do isn't that true? So how do we? Great that you're at 1,000. That's awesome, but you're bringing in money like you're 450. And so I think the pastor has to start to think like, okay, how do I've got to be I've got to be the fundraiser guy. I got to be the chief fundraiser is what I call it. Like I gotta foster relationships with high capacity givers. I've got to figure out tiers of giving and how do I move people up in the game. Like what can I do to make sure that people are being discipled and using resources for the kingdom? How am I able to do that? And I think that's one area they've got to go to. Another area they have to go to is they have to stay in the lane of vision. Vision is, here's what it's like. It's like if you go outside, and I've been at your church, you go outside in the parking lot, you see a bird on the ground. I don't know, crow or whatever. It's on the ground. It's picking away and trying to find something to eat. Now it goes up in the air, I don't know, 1,000 feet. It can't see the ground as much, but it can see a lot farther. That's the shift that happens with leaders. You have to start moving from the ground and not seeing as much details, but you now have to be the one that sees a lot farther. So you have an executive pastor, you have an executive pastor, a team, an associate that's carrying out the details, worrying about the details, but you're up there going, this is where I see us going 2 years from now. Here's where I see us happening 3 or 4 years from now. A lot of guys work in ministry and they very rarely work on it. And there's a difference. And you have to step back, fly up in the air and start working on it. And if you're not the chief visionary, we're in trouble. If you're not the chief fundraiser, you're in trouble. Remember, I told you about the sentence, if I don't do blank, our future's threatened. Well, if you don't raise resources, the future's threatened. If you're not casting vision for 3 years out from now, yeah, our future's threatened. We don't have a future. That's what the things you have to start going into as a lead pastor as you look towards growth. Those are just some of the examples. But but the acid test to all of it, Paul, is if I don't do blank, our future's threatened. What's the blank?
Yeah.
Okay, it's well, if I don't worry about all the assimilation, our future's threatened. No, someone can, but no one else can. You can't delegate influence. So I got to worry about the vision. I got to worry about the fundraising. That's where you have to start moving into. Yeah. So.
Well, we're a little nervous because we started doing the math. If we just grew 20% per quarter, the compounding way that happens, we really feel like it could happen. I mean, it's like the
awesome.
gates are open, the momentum's here. So it's getting a little scary for me because I'm thinking, wow, we better be thinking about 5 steps ahead here on what's next. 2 services is around the corner. We have a pretty decent sized auditorium, but still. We're feeling the crowding in the children's space right now. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I get it. Well, that's as you grow, it changes. but it changed. The height and distance change. That's what has to change. You can move up and you see farther, and you have to. That's finances. You have to, as a lead pastor, a leader of any organization, to see farther, further, faster than anybody else, because you have to see the bell curve before everybody else sees it. You have to. You have to look and go, which you are doing. You're thinking, whoa, if we don't keep up with A and B, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Maybe not next week, but in a year from now. You have to see that. Others won't see it. You have to see it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've run, a pretty good-sized church before, but it was when I was younger and I worked myself silly, and I didn't have systems and teams doing things like I should have.
Yeah.
That's not sustainable or scalable, I was telling our team today, about building a bus, we're all building a bus with seats in it, and you've got to carry people somewhere. But then you got to think also like building a fleet of buses. So you go from being a driver to a dispatcher,
That's good, yeah.
And that's part. But then there comes this point where you're impinging. Your point of impingement becomes your real estate, your facilities. And I think here's where this is a whole nother conversation, I guess, outside of the scope of your coaching. But where's the church go beyond that? You have to produce big people, right? You can't just own everything inside of a piece of real estate in one institution. You have to have a centrifugal force that kind of moves people outside of the church to do the gospel. And I think we need an even bigger idea. We need a bigger idea. We really do in America. We need a bigger idea than just building a church on a corner.
That's a good thought.
Anyway.
Man, Paul, hey, I just realized our time. I've got to jump on the next one, but man, it's always good connecting with you. And I'm thrilled to see 21% increase. That's an incredible testimony. And, I'm here to help in any way, whatever the next step looks like for you. Let's keep it going.
So really thank you, because that timing of that day you spent with us was so godsend. And it really set us on a path for just knowing what to do with the energy that we have. So that was awesome. So
That's awesome. Well, you're welcome, and always here to serve, man. Appreciate you, buddy. Have a good day, man. All right,
God bless.
See you. Thank you for tuning in to the Fly on the Wall podcast. We hope today's episode provided you with some practical steps to lead your church to the next level. If you found this episode helpful, take a moment to leave us a review and share it with others. Remember, when the pastor grows, the church grows, and we grow pastors. We love you. We're your raving fans, and we are cheering you on. See you next week.